It was September 3rd, 2015. In the Dolomites of Washington State, the morning light scraped across the jagged peaks like a blade, casting long shadows against the limestone monolith known as Dagger's Edge, a sheer 3,500-foot vertical face that jutted out of the mountains like a monument to gravity itself. Rico Alvarez crouched behind his camera equipment, methodically locking the tripod into the bedrock. This was routine for him, at least it had been. For 3 years, he had documented Eric and Jenna Linwood's breathtaking wingsuit flights, capturing their near-impossible stunts from dizzying altitudes. Their YouTube channel was a cult phenomenon, part aerial ballet, part Russian roulette. Eric was the showman, reckless, brilliant, addicted to danger. Jenna, quiet and calculated, found her control in precision, not chaos. Together, they were unstoppable, a team built on trust, skill, and an intimate understanding of risk. That morning, however, the wind was shifting. Jenna had noticed the subtle pattern hours earlier. Soft gusts, unpredictable, like something moving against the grain. She mentioned it at breakfast, but Eric's mind was already set. Today's flight was his idea, a razor-thin descent, hugging the limestone wall all the way to a narrow ravine below. They suited up. Rico adjusted the focus on his lens, watching as they gave each other one last tug check. Then Eric stepped to the edge and jumped. The wingsuit bloomed open, catching the air like a living thing. Rico followed through the lens as Eric sliced down the cliffside, only a dozen feet out, tracing the line perfectly. The first seconds were flawless, controlled, beautiful. Then Rico saw it. A subtle shiver in the tree line far below. A backward sway. Almost invisible, but enough to tilt fate on its axis. The gust struck Eric like a hammer. His right arm jerked upward, the wingsuit collapsing on one side. Rico widened the frame just as Eric veered hard left, overcorrected, and pitched forward at an impossible angle. For a heartbeat, it looked recoverable. Then came the sound. A dull, brutal crack echoed through the canyon like a gunshot. Eric's chest struck the rock face. He bounced once, twice, then disappeared into the trees below. But there was no time to process. Jenna was already in the air behind him. At first, her line held steady, but panic flickered in every adjustment. She was descending too fast. The terrain rose sharply beneath her, a wall of jagged outcroppings and pine. She tried to bank right, searching for lift, but the wind wouldn't give it. Rico watched helplessly as her legs cleared the first tree line by inches. The second did not forgive her. A branch caught her left leg, snapping her sideways with a sickening whip. Her body slammed into another tree, spinning violently through the canopy before vanishing into the foliage below. Rico dropped the camera and ran. It took nearly 40 minutes to reach her. Jenna's wingsuit was torn open down the back, her body crumpled, blood soaking the ground beneath her. She was barely alive. He called 911, but her breathing stuttered out before help could arrive. She was pronounced dead when paramedics finally airlifted her out. Eric's body wasn't found for 2 more days. A helicopter spotted his shattered helmet wedged between 2 ledges. He'd died on impact. Within a week, the Linwoods channel went silent. Every video was wiped. Rico returned their hard drives to the family without a word. Then he disappeared from the wingsuit world entirely. The wind that morning had seemed small, just a subtle shift in the trees. But in the air, small things can decide everything. One small gust of wind was all it took to change everything. But the next story doesn't begin with wind. It begins with a scream. It was a cool, misty morning in the Kamardaban mountain range, where dense forests and jagged peaks stretched across the southern Siberian wilderness. The August air carried the scent of wet earth and pine, a remnant of the night's rain that left the trails slick and treacherous. Remote and unforgiving, this landscape near Lake Baikal had long drawn adventurers eager to test their limits against its unpredictable terrain. Among them was Lyudmila Korovina, a revered survival instructor and seasoned mountaineer. At 41, she was a master of sports, respected across the region for her discipline, skill, and unwavering leadership. That summer, she was leading 6 students she knew well: Alexander Kryson, 23, Tatiana Filipenko, 24, Denis Shvachkin, 19, Valentina Utochenko, 17, Victoria Zalesova, 16, and Timur Bapanov, 15. They had trained for months for this expedition, a grueling 2,362,200 foot trek across Siberia's rugged backcountry. On August 2nd, after confirming favorable forecasts, the team set out from the village of Marino, following the Langutai River. The rain returned by August 4th, unexpected and relentless, turning the paths into rivers of mud. That night, they struggled to build a fire in the damp, heavy air. Still, their spirits remained high. The next day, they reached their summit, 25,758 feet above sea level, a hard-earned moment of triumph. They couldn't have known it would be their last. As they began their descent, a scream shattered the calm. Alexander collapsed first, convulsing violently as blood leaked from his eyes and ears. Lyudmila rushed to his side, but within seconds, she too was struck by the same horrifying symptoms. Panic tore through the group. Tatiana gasped desperately for air before slamming her head against the rocks in agony. Victoria and Timur clawed at their own skin, tearing their clothing in blind terror before collapsing. Denis and Valentina tried to run, but Denis fell mid-stride, writhing in pain. Valentina Utochenko was the only one left standing. For 4 days, she wandered alone through the mountains, blood-streaked and delirious, following power lines in a desperate bid for survival. On August 9th, Ukrainian kayakers found her near a riverbank. She was in shock, barely able to speak. The official search didn't begin until August 24th. When helicopters finally located the bodies 2 days later, the scene they uncovered was both grim and deeply perplexing. Autopsies concluded that 5 hikers had died from hypothermia. Lyudmila's death was attributed to a heart attack, but the horrific symptoms Valentina described, convulsions, bleeding, frantic self-inflicted injuries, hinted at something far more sinister. She avoided the press for decades, refusing to discuss what she had witnessed. When a reporter finally reached her 25 years later, she reacted with hostility, refusing to revisit the memories. Over time, even the details of her story shifted, blurred by trauma or time. Some sources named Kangula Peak as the location, others Retranslator Peak. What exactly happened on that mountainside remains uncertain. Theories surfaced quickly. Some pointed to secret military experiments, citing the region's proximity to restricted zones. Others suggested industrial contamination, or that the group might have unknowingly ingested poisonous plants or mushrooms. None of it fully explained what Valentina saw. The tragedy drew immediate comparisons to the infamous Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959, when 9 experienced hikers led by Igor Dyatlov were found dead in the Urals, bodies mutilated, bones crushed, tents slashed open from the inside. No explanation was ever proven. Like Dyatlov Pass, Kamar Daban has become a name spoken in uneasy tones, a place where the wilderness swallowed its secrets whole. And to this day, no one can say for certain what drove a healthy, experienced group of hikers to such a violent and chaotic end. Only one woman remains to remember it, and she refuses to speak. The last tragedy came from what no one saw coming. But this next one, everyone watched. It was October 1st, 1995, a crisp autumn day at Niagara Falls. Thousands of tourists gathered along the viewing platforms, their cameras aimed toward the breathtaking cascade where water thundered 167 feet down into the churning basin below. Among the crowd stood Robert Overacker, a 39-year-old stunt school graduate from Camarillo, California. His heart raced. After 7 years of planning, today would be the day he attempted something extraordinary. Robert intended to ride a jet ski over the edge of Horseshoe Falls, with a rocket-propelled parachute strapped to his back. This wasn't just about adrenaline. He wanted to use the stunt to raise awareness for a cause close to his heart. Across the front of his jet ski, a sign read, "Save the Homeless." His brother Michael Zurich and close friend Christopher Yian waited on shore with their cameras ready. They believed they were about to witness a spectacular success, a daring moment that would capture the world's attention and spread Robert's message. At 12:35 p.m., Robert entered the Niagara River near the Canadian Niagara Power Plant. The jet ski's engine roared to life as he accelerated toward the falls, cutting cleanly through the rapids with practiced control. He had been here before, twice, only to be talked out of the stunt by worried friends. But not this time. Tourists began to notice the lone figure speeding toward the brink. German visitor Manfred Baldus raised his camcorder, unknowingly about to record Robert's final moments. As the jet ski surged forward, Robert raised his arms in triumph and let go, launching himself into the void. This was the moment the rocket-propelled parachute was supposed to deploy, slowing his fall and guiding him safely into the swirling pool below. But nothing happened. The chute failed to open. Later reports suggested it might not have been properly secured to his body. For 5.6 seconds, Robert plunged through the air, and then he struck the water with brutal, unforgiving force. As Tom Dienbeck, a park police dispatcher, would later explain, "When you're hitting water, it's like hitting cement at that height." For a moment, some onlookers believed they saw him moving in the rapids below, sparking a fragile hope that he might have survived. But what they were seeing was only his body being tossed violently by the current. Crew members from the Maid of the Mist tour boat were the first to reach him. Despite desperate attempts to revive him, Robert was pronounced dead at Niagara General Hospital about an hour later. Robert Overacker became the 15th person since 1901 to intentionally go over Niagara Falls in or on a device, and the 5th to die in the attempt. He left behind his wife, Lori, his family, and a community stunned by the tragedy. His death wasn't the last. Since 1995, 6 more people have attempted to go over the falls intentionally. 2 of them didn't survive. But perhaps the most haunting part of Robert's story is the footage itself. Those final seconds, arms raised in triumph, unaware that he was seconds away from eternity. What began as a bold stunt to help others became a sobering reminder of just how thin the line between spectacle and tragedy can be. Now this story was about a man stepping toward danger. The next is about a woman caught in it. It was a bright June morning at Horsetail Falls in Alpine, Utah. Clear mountain water tumbled down the cliffs in a silver rush, churning over smooth stone. The warmth of early summer filled the canyon, and the creek, swollen with snowmelt from the high ridges above, roared with unusual force. The trail to Horsetail Falls is steep, rocky, and beautiful, a favorite for hikers looking for challenge and quiet. That day, 19-year-old Cynthia Ann Grimwood set out with her small dog for what should have been a peaceful solo hike. She was no stranger to these mountains. A Springville native and former high school softball player, Cynthia loved pushing herself physically. She hiked often, documenting her adventures with photos and short videos, small moments of stillness in wild places. She parked her car at the trailhead and began the climb. Her dog trotted faithfully beside her as she passed through dense pine forest and sunlit clearings. But the creek that normally wound gently alongside the path wasn't gentle that day. Snowmelt had transformed it into a torrent, carving its way through the canyon with deceptive strength. Sometime in the afternoon, Cynthia paused near the water's edge. Maybe she was cooling off, refilling a bottle, or filming the falls. What happened next was only revealed later, when rescuers recovered her phone. Her final recording captured the roar of the creek, and then silence. Around 3 p.m., 2 hikers nearing the falls stumbled upon an unsettling scene. A small dog stood alone near the river, agitated and refusing to leave. Cynthia's phone and a few personal belongings were scattered on the rocks. She was nowhere to be found. The hikers called for help immediately. Rescue teams from the Utah County Sheriff's Office and Utah Department of Public Safety mobilized, bringing in firefighters and a helicopter crew. But the swollen creek complicated everything. The current was fast, cold, and brutal, the kind that can sweep someone away in seconds and make recovery dangerous even for professionals. As night fell, the search had to be suspended, Early the next morning, teams found her downstream, pinned beneath fallen trees. The terrain was treacherous, but they carefully recovered her body. The medical examiner confirmed what rescuers already knew. Cynthia had drowned. Her loyal dog, who had stayed near the spot all night, was safely returned to her family. And this tragedy wasn't isolated. Just a day later, a 12-year-old boy was swept away in the Provo River near Bridal Veil Falls. He was pulled from the water within minutes, but he did not survive. These back-to-back incidents were a sobering reminder of how quickly mountain creeks can turn deadly during snowmelt season. Beneath their clear, cold surface, hidden currents move with unforgiving power. Cynthia's final video was meant to capture a beautiful moment in nature. Instead, it became a quiet record of how thin the line between adventure and tragedy can be. Today, hikers still visit Horsetail Falls, but many pause at the water's edge, the rush of the creek a stark reminder that even familiar places can hold unseen danger. This was a tragedy written in water. The next was written in ash and fire. It was May 18, 1980, a deceptively calm Sunday morning in southwestern Washington state. The skies were clear, and Mount St. Helens loomed large against the horizon, its northern slope swollen and unstable after weeks of mounting seismic activity. For 48-year-old photographer Robert Landsberg, this was the day he had been waiting for. A freelance photographer from Portland, Oregon, he had been meticulously documenting the volcano since March, when the first tremors signaled that something catastrophic might be coming. Each trip had brought him closer to the mountain, and each photograph captured its transformation. The expanding bulge on the northern face, swelling outward 5 to 8 feet per day. That morning, Landsberg parked his 1969 Dodge station wagon on a ridge roughly 4 miles from the summit. From there, he could frame the volcano perfectly. He set up his tripod, mounted his camera, and began what he believed would be another day of quiet observation. In his journal the night before, he'd written, "Feel right on the verge of something." And at 8:32 a.m., his intuition proved tragically correct. A 5.1 magnitude earthquake struck beneath the volcano. Through his viewfinder, Landsberg watched the unimaginable. The entire north face of Mount St. Helens collapsing in on itself, unleashing the most destructive volcanic eruption in U.S. history. The blast released 24 megatons of thermal energy, the equivalent of more than 1,600 Hiroshima bombs. A massive lateral explosion tore across the landscape, flattening everything in its path. Landsberg did not run. He photographed. Frame after frame captured the ash cloud boiling upward, the shockwave tearing through the forest, and the pyroclastic flow, a wall of superheated gas, ash, and rock, racing toward him at over 300 miles per hour. As the roar intensified, Landsberg made a series of deliberate final actions that revealed extraordinary clarity of mind. Realizing escape was impossible, he rewound the film, sealed the camera in his backpack, and lay across it with his body, using himself as a shield to protect his work. Moments later, the pyroclastic flow reached him. The superheated ash, over 800 degrees Fahrenheit, killed him instantly. Like 56 others that day, Landsberg was entombed beneath the volcanic debris. 17 days later, on June 4th, rescuers found his body. Incredibly, the backpack beneath him had protected the camera and film from the worst of the blast. Though scorched and damaged, the film survived. The photographs, later developed and published in the January 1981 issue of National Geographic, became some of the most significant visual records of the eruption's early moments. The final frames show the ash cloud growing larger and larger, a towering gray wall closing in at impossible speed. Landsberg was not the only photographer to lose his life that day. Reed Blackburn, a 27-year-old photographer for the Columbian newspaper, also perished when the blast overwhelmed his observation post 8 miles from the summit. His camera and film were destroyed by the heat. David A. Johnston, a volcanologist with the United States Geological Survey, was stationed 6 miles away. His final transmission became infamous. Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it. Seconds later, the flow engulfed his post. What set Landsberg apart was his final choice. He could have run, but he didn't. Instead, he ensured that the world would see what was coming. His last act preserved invaluable scientific data that helped researchers understand the dynamics of the eruption in a way no instrument could have alone. The eruption permanently reshaped Mount St. Helens, carving away 1,300 feet of its summit and leaving behind a vast, horseshoe-shaped crater. The blast zone stretched for miles, flattening forests and scarring the landscape into a gray wasteland. Robert Landsberg's photographs remain both a scientific treasure and a haunting reminder of how close he stood to the edge of oblivion. In his final moments, as death roared toward him, he chose not to save himself, but to save the story of what was happening. Now, from this brutal reminder of how unstoppable nature can be, we move on to the last story, one that proves it all over again. It was July 21st, 2018. Morning light scattered across Zion like liquid gold, spilling slowly over jagged cliffs and settling on the desert floor in quiet brilliance. The sky, still pale with the breath of dawn, hung wide and empty above Caleb Terrace Road. Below, where the pavement bled into red dust, a small hatchback idled in the silence. Two brothers, Nathan and Jude Merriman, stood beside it, tightening laces, buckling harnesses, and strapping on helmets. Nathan snapped a photo of the view, the kind you only take at the start of something unforgettable. The GoPro mounted to Jude's helmet was already rolling. Later, when rescuers salvaged the corrupted footage, they would pause it frame by frame. The exact second Jude turns to say something, a laugh, maybe a joke, before the sound begins, before the canyon itself seems to turn against them. They were young, ambitious, and hungry for adventure. Jude, 22, was the anchor, an engineering student at UT Austin with laminated maps, backup GPS files, and meticulous packing lists. Nathan, 19, was the dreamer, restless, reverent, drawn to the natural world like it held answers no textbook could. They'd named the trip the 10-part gauntlet, a pact forged on dorm room floors and summer drives. 3 weeks, 10 national parks, thousands of miles. Zion was the prize at the end of the road. And Shadow Spine, their final descent. Unofficial, unmarked. Whispers of it lived only in niche forums and the stories of people who sought danger and silence. Its entrance, buried behind a rockfall and twisted junipers, kept it hidden. Few had seen it. Fewer had finished it. For Jude and Nathan, that was the point. By 9:40 a.m., they were halfway down. The world above was gone. The slot canyon closed around them like a throat, stone pressing in from either side, sunlight slicing through in thin, cold ribbons. The air was damp and smelled of algae and sandstone. Their voices bounced back at odd angles, faint and delayed. Jude moved first, rope in hand, fluid in his motions. Nathan followed, calling out softly each time his boots touched down. The footage shows them moving easily, like dancers in rhythm with the earth. Then, a single drop of water landed on Nathan's helmet. He wiped it away without a thought. Jude glanced up, shrugged, kept going. Neither of them checked again. The sound came softly at first. A whisper, like wind through distant pines. Then a hiss, then a roar. They froze, exchanging quick, uncertain glances, trying to locate its source. But in a slot canyon, echoes twist. They come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then the corner behind them turned brown. A flash flood. 6 inches of water can knock a person off their feet. In these narrow walls, 6 inches becomes a 10-foot surge. A wall of debris, stone, and unstoppable force. Jude grabbed the rope. Nathan clawed upward at slick sandstone. The flood arrived. The GoPro caught the first impact. A violent lurch, a scream swallowed by water, a blur of movement, a hand, and then nothing. The last frame is a churn of brown water bubbling where 2 people had stood seconds earlier. Search and rescue found their car the next day. Maps on the dash, granola wrappers in the back, a GPS trail leading into Shadow Spine. The canyon was still draining, silent and indifferent. At the third rappel, a frayed rope was wrapped around a boulder like a warning left too late. Farther down, a boot wedged between stones, a cracked helmet. 3 days later, Nathan's body surfaced 5 miles downstream, tangled in branches. Jude was found 2 days after that, still clipped to his harness beneath a jam of collapsed logs. Their story spread fast. On canyoneering forums, posts filled with tributes, heartbreak, and hard truths. Veterans warned about outlaw routes and deceptive summer skies. Park officials erected bold new signs, posted flash flood alerts with brutal honesty, and stripped Shadow Spine from most maps. But the canyon itself remained silent, waiting. Today, in training sessions and safety briefings, rescuers still show the recovered GoPro footage. Instructors pause the frame just before the roar. A single second of calm. A reminder of how quickly beauty can turn violent. Now that was all for today, folks. If you enjoyed these horrifying clips, click to see more on the video on screen.